Welcome to PubTech in Review, led by Vidizoo, a video monetization platform focused on creating high-end video products for digital publishers. This podcast is dedicated to building a community and uncovering the subjects that matter most to digital publishers. Join us as we break down and explore industry policy, expert opinions, monetization technologies, and programmatic industry's future. PubTech in Review.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of PubTech in Review. My name is Ty, and today we will unpack a buzzing topic across our industry: digital identity and the shift away from third-party cookies. Now, although the deprecation has been pushed once again, my guest has a lot of useful information for you, so stay tuned. In today's evolving landscape, the concept of identity is undergoing a transformative shift, primarily driven by increasing concerns over privacy and data security. Traditionally, this identity has been tracked through the use of third-party cookies. However, as awareness and concerns about privacy have grown, third-party cookies have been shown the door. For decades, cookies have been the cornerstone of online advertising, enabling advertisers to target and retarget consumers with precision, providing an intricate understanding of consumer behavior, preferences, and potential purchasing patterns. However, the practice has raised significant privacy concerns. Users often felt they had little control over their personal information and how it was being used by unknown parties. This led to a push for more privacy-centric policies, evidenced by regulations like GDPR and CCPA. In a response to these growing concerns, major industry players, including browser providers like Google and Apple, have taken significant steps. Safari and even Mozilla's Firefox have already phased out third-party cookies by default. And when it comes to Chrome, who knows what the future holds? The shift is forcing the ad tech industry to rethink and innovate new ways to maintain digital identity without compromising user privacy. The future is leaning towards solutions that emphasize privacy and data security. This includes development of new technologies like the privacy sandbox, contextual advertising models, and federated learning that do not rely on invasive tracking practices. Another important aspect of this shift is the move towards first-party data, where companies rely on data collected directly from consumers with their consent. This transformation presents both challenges and opportunities. While advertisers need to navigate the landscape without detailed tracking mechanisms, there is a genuine chance to build trust with consumers by focusing on their privacy and being transparent. As the industry adapts to these changes, the focus will be on creating a more sustainable and privacy-respecting approach to digital identity.
PubTech in Review, led by Vidizoo.
I'm thrilled to welcome Caitlin Borgman, Chief Commercial Officer of ID5. Caitlin is at the forefront of pioneering solutions for digital identity in an era where privacy is paramount. Caitlin, thank you for joining me. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ty and Vidizoo. I'm privileged to be here with you and to talk about this topic. And it's certainly one that I know that you all live on a day-to-day basis as well. And so we're excited to be partnered with you.
So, Caitlin, to kick things off, digital identity is constantly evolving, especially with privacy concerns and tech changes. How do you envision the evolution of identity in the space?
So it's interesting on the evolution of it. I mean, ID5 was founded in 2017 by experienced people in data and programmatic advertising who really saw this is right before GDPR was coming into effect, an opportunity, not just a need, but also the opportunity to build a better identifier. That third-party cookies were not the ideal solution, which I think even 7 years ago, people would have recognized that there are weaknesses in third-party cookies as an identifier. Not the least of which it doesn't fit all forms of media. It's a browser-based, it kind of works with. So what we've seen on the evolution is, initially, we built our tech thinking around, originally founded in Europe, around the strictest privacy laws in the world, particularly GDPR, and built it with also the ability to have adaptability based on how privacy laws evolve in different parts of the world. You mentioned CCPA, for example, and obviously we're now these days, there's talk about privacy regulation, a federal law in the United States, and you've got others around the world like Brazil and other places where their own versions of privacy laws are coming into effect that ad tech is going to need to cater to. So we built it with that kind of adaptability in mind. Also, the core product that we offer, the ID5 ID, has security measures built into it. It's encrypted. It lives and resides within our publisher partners' first-party domains. So it's decentralized in that regard. It rotates. And above and beyond anything else, we always prioritize user consent in sort of the resolution of the ID itself. So is the consumer consented, whether that's an opt-in environment or an opt-out environment. What we've seen on the evolution side, though, is like definitely the constituents of ad tech who cared the most about this to begin with were publishers, ad-supported publishers who didn't have authenticated audiences, which is by and large the bulk of the web. And they're the first to really gravitate and first movers in this whole space. And so that's a lot of the foundation of ID5's relationships with publishers, and part of why we have the largest footprint online today as far as adoption of IDs. And then the supply side, it worked its way through the bloodstream, if you will, right? The supply side themselves started to pass IDs. Demand side started to recognize the opportunities, especially as Safari started to deprecate more and more identifiers. You've had a whole environment over the past few years of cookieless environments, unaddressable audiences, and like Safari, for example, which has then presented like business opportunities to reach those audiences through the use of like an ID5 ID and in other solutions too. And now, as we're at the dawn of, or at the, not the dawn of, but sort of the year when Google officially does deprecate cookies, which they've already started to do at the beginning of this year, and you referenced it in your opening, it is more real to the ultimate, advertisers, advertising community now too. So it'll be interesting. I think as far as that's kind of where we're at today. And then I think, as we move into the future, which I won't get a little too ahead of myself, we're going to find that people will start to realize, well, wait a second, identity is much bigger than the third-party cookie. There's sort of a fixation on the third-party cookie right now. But new forms of identity, as we see it at ID5, are really emerging when you think about spaces like audio and gaming, and where third-party cookies were never applicable.
Now, with the increasing demand for privacy-compliant solutions, could you discuss the challenges and opportunities in creating a privacy-first identification infrastructure?
Well, I think the challenges are, the most obvious one is probably just regulatory nuances country to country. The web doesn't have a geographic boundary around it, but yet the laws that we adhere to are geographic in nature, right? So, U.S. companies, like when GDPR came into effect, for example, a lot of U.S. companies just pulled out of operating in Europe because it was too challenging. Not just U.S. companies, a lot of companies did. So even within the United States, kind of the debate around privacy laws are, the CCPA is California specific. Well, what if it's a California resident, accessing the internet from a different state, or, you have these like kind of nuances, which are in large part why, at least in the US, there's kind of a push towards a federal law to cover it globally. So I think one aspect is this adhering to or reconciling the technology with the regulations themselves to protect consumers, whether you're talking on a global level or sort of more individual state kind of level in the US based. I think there's also challenges so how do you build modularity almost in your solutions to be able to accommodate that? And as I was mentioning, that's for us, since we built our technology for solving this problem in mind at a global level, I think we're better equipped to do that. There's also just education. It moves fast, and there are a lot of different interpretations of what privacy means, because we're all consumers and at the same time we're technologists, and You talk to an advertiser, they might have a different view than, somebody, that's running identity or product at an SSP. So I think that that's one of the challenges. There's also interoperability, which tends to be a buzzword, which has a number of elements to it. One is just practical interoperability from a product perspective. But, what if consent is collected in one environment, but intended to be passed through to another environment? Those are some of the other challenges. I think the industry collectively, we're making progress in that way. I will say that from our perspective, ID5, one of the things, aside from how we built our tech, is we provide solutions for anybody, for any consumer. For example, we have a data privacy center. When we're talking to partners, we have a documentation around how we deal with privacy. There's a data deletion API for consumers. We support and recommend anybody else support, like IAB Tech Labs, global privacy platform, the GPP. So I think those are some of the challenges. I think we're making, headway, or not headway, we're making progress along the lines, but it's a moving, shape-shifting kind of thing that's full of interpretation and arbitrary boundaries around geography and technology. So that's kind of like a big nut of a problem, but that's what I would say some of the challenges are.
I'm wondering how your adoption rates are looking in Europe, where they follow GDPR, versus California, where they follow CCPA, versus the rest of the US, where there is no law at the moment to govern this thing.
Yeah. So, well, it might be, I love this question, particularly as an American. I've been with ID5 for about a year and a half. And so it's really interesting to observe how this topic is viewed and perceived within the European market, let alone global markets, even Asia, APAC. It's kind of interesting too. But between European and American sort of companies and thought leaders in the space. This is a bit oversimplifying it, but as I see it, or as we see it in Europe, right? It's an opt-in. Do you accept or reject? Like the window that we always see on when we visit a site. In the US, it's an opt-out. So they're very different approaches, right? Which is also why in the US, I think there's been a hyperfixation around using hashed email and as a proxy, like as the ultimate first-party identity. So if you have email, you have consent, and so on. I mean, there's more to it than that. In Europe, it's more protective because you're requiring opt-in. And so I think the European market, for probably a whole host of reasons, is much more aware, much more cautious, much more comfortable talking about identity and privacy and what that means in the context of advertising than I think the US market is at the moment. The US market's coming along, but particularly on the buying community, there's more about like, oh, what's your, what's the, do you have enough first party data? And in Europe, it's more about consent because that's what GDPR is. GDPR isn't a lockdown on privacy. It's about making sure that consumers have control over whether or not they're going to be identified, and whether or not, and transparency in what's happening to their data.
Now, sooner or later, third-party cookies will be phased out, and digital identity continues to become a very important aspect for both publishers and advertisers. Do you feel you make an impact for either of these, or maybe both of these sides of the equation?
Yeah, well, we like to think we do. We hope so. In one of the things that's unique about ID5 in this space is, we believe there will be, like many people believe, like there will be more than one ID solution. There's not like a single ID solution that solves it all. So we are complementary to others. However, one of the things that gives us an advantage that is unique about ID5 compared to other ID solutions is we just our whole business is just focused on resolving identity and this challenge in and of itself. So, we don't have an ID solution to support a media business. We don't have an ID solution to support a data onboarding or modeling business, or we don't have an ID solution to sell third-party data segments like other ID solutions out there. That gives us a level of neutrality, and sort of our focus on it, especially over the past 7 years, where we've been able to become real thought leaders and help facilitate and bring a lot of those other ID solutions and companies together to talk about how the whole industry can evolve. So we do have a role that we have been playing, which is, starts a lot with education and helping to create the forum for people to come together, companies to come together to talk about it. Beyond that, and more specifically, there's a few things that I guess to kind of get into recommendations, which is we've produced a lot of collateral around best practices, whether that's for publishers, things like making sure you have the most up-to-date, pre-bid integration, or here are the other ways through like Amazon TAM or Google Secure Signals you can access our ID solutions. Here are ways that we encourage you to talk to your tech platforms. So if you're a publisher, for example, yes, you have the ID integrated, but you want to make sure that your SSP partners are actually picking up the ID from you and passing it along so that ultimately the demand can get to you. Similarly, we do a lot of advising on how to properly test, effectiveness, like A/B testing. It's important right now, if you were doing a test on identifiers, to look at what the impact is in a Safari environment versus a Chrome environment, because Safari is essentially like full-on cookieless. If we're just talking about browser environments, what additional signals can you share that would actually improve the fidelity of the identity resolution as it applies to your property? And we do a similar thing on the advertiser side too. So because for a lot of companies, it's a new experience, and in identity, particularly through the third-party cookie, sort of just been built into the operating system of ad tech. So it's not something you've had to really think about, even if we all know on the surface what it does, which is targeting, and also then campaign measuring and the measurement side, which sometimes get lost in the equation.
How do you guys ensure consumer privacy while still providing a comprehensive solution for identity?
I touched on this a little bit, but to go into it a little further, we, with all of our publishers, we sign. So let's just say it starts with on the publisher side, right? Because the consumer is on the publisher side. With all of our publisher relationships, integrations, if you will, we have contractual agreements we sign. And in those contractual agreements, which leads into sort of the technical integration, part of the requirements are that the consent string from a consent management system, let's just stick on Europe for a moment, or European, a GDPR level, is sent to ID5. So the consent string is the first and foremost, but on any other kind of signal, like browser-based signal or email or what have you, may be sent to us from the publisher, we verify that consent string. And so there's a contractual thing, and then there's this sort of the operational side of it. And if there's no consent, we don't return an actionable ID to the publisher. If we can't conclude, it's inconclusive whether, for whatever reason, we don't return an actionable ID to the publisher. So essentially, like, ward off that consumer from being able to resolve their identity. Now, the ID itself, as I mentioned before, is encrypted. It resides in the publisher's and the publisher's environment, so that rotates. So if next time we see that person and what's passed to us by a publisher verifies consent, then we return the consented ID. That's the sort of oversimplification of how it works, like in day to day, like right now as we talk, is happening as consumers visit a website, a news website, or a video, watching a video, and then what's happening behind the scenes. Beyond that, though, we provide the other measures, things like a privacy center, the data deletion API, and tools for consumers. If for instance, a consumer were aware of ID5, they can come to us and say, removed you from any possible aspects of marketing in the future, then we have those mechanisms too that sort of override anything that we might be working on with a publisher directly.
That's pretty cool. So you're actually like an independent privacy identity kind of data hub for them.
We thank you for like saying that. Like we hold ourselves accountable for that too, right? Like it's not just about providing privacy centric technology for like a publisher partner, but it's also holding ourselves to those standards. It's a double kind of dual verification or kind of monitoring system, if you will.
So Caitlin, let's fast forward to a year from now. What are people going to be talking about?
Yeah, I love this question because, yeah, I've maybe touched on this a little bit. Right now, like, I don't think we'll be talking about the third party cookie. Everybody talks about the third party cookie, right? Like, it's just, uh, so we won't be talking about third party cookie as much. And what I mean by that too is like, there's so many other aspects to identity that don't involve cookies. Connected television, right? Like it's like everybody's talking about connected television. It's like it's a huge frontier or growing area of the internet economy, and I know I'm sure quite important for your business too. Well, in a connected television environment, IP is typically used for identity. And there could be challenges, with IP. And so we talk to companies in the CTV space and are working with companies in the CTV space about data protection, that the ID5 ID can be used as a form of identity in connected television that helps protect your data and also helps mitigate the risks associated with IP degradation and, that may be coming around. Similarly, I mentioned mobile and gaming. We're working with not mobile, excuse me, audio, mobile too, but audio environments. Podcasting is a huge booming industry, and streaming audio. And those are in player environments where cookies don't work. And so if you are selling that inventory, or trying to reach audiences and identify audiences in programmatic advertising, the ID5 ID can help do that and is helping to do that with certain partners of ours like Triton Digital and the iHeart Group. Gaming is a similar environment too. So there's sort of these new frontiers where cookies aren't applicable that I think are going to become more in focus, is sort of the next area of identity, because marketers run their campaigns across all those environments, and they want to be able to identify audiences across all those environments. I think another area we're seeing more now too is in the area of measurement. There's been a sort of fixation on targeting audiences, like the cookie to target. Cookies are involved in frequency capping campaigns and attribution modeling and the feedback loop that occurs there. If somebody doesn't convert after 3 times of seeing a creative, maybe you want to give them a new creative. So we're starting to talk to more potential partners about and work with partners in areas of measurement. And then what does that look like when you go into your measurement tools, your ad serving tools and so on. So I think we'll start to see the aperture opening on the types of mediums, measurement, not just targeting. And then the last thing that kind of comes to mind on this is, and I mentioned it with the U.S. audience, there is a real focus on hashed email as a proxy of identity, first party data, meaning hashed email as a proxy for identity. It's great if you have that. It's permissible in the United States. Like it does conflate, consent a little bit with the possession of an email. Like just because I signed up for a newsletter doesn't mean I've agreed to, being followed around the web. So who knows if something happens there. But the biggest thing with that is like, it's just not scalable. It's just not realistic to think that the entire internet ecosystem economy can function without on using hashed email as a proxy for identity. So those are some of the things. I think basically the conversation is going to get it. We won't be talking about third-party cookies. We'll be talking about identity in a new lens, in a new way a year from now.
Caitlin, it's been enlightening to hear your perspectives on this subject. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Vidazoo, for being an ID5 believer and partner.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of PopTech in Review. I hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights into the future of identity and privacy. Remember that every challenge is an opportunity to innovate and enhance how we engage with audiences. Until next time, see you soon.
PubTech in Review.